Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate on the day of the funeral of Russia's ambassador to Turkey. We're looking at how Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the president of Turkey, is pivoting when it comes to the situation in neighboring Syria and his relations with Russia. We're doing so in the company of Abdelbari Atwan, editor-in-chief of Rai Al-Um, the news website based normally in London, but here visiting us in the French capital. Thank you for joining us here in the studio.
It is a pleasure.
From Ankara, Talha Koze, the research director at the SETA think tank. Welcome back to the show. Welcome back as well to Faik Yagikzai, representative for the Kurdish-rooted opposition HDP party at the Council of Europe, and France 24 correspondent Jasper Mortimer, who's also in the Turkish capital. We were talking before the break about how this assassination could impact the relationship between Ankara and Moscow. The State Department, the U.S. State Department's former head of East Mediterranean affairs, telling the magazine Foreign Policy that the U.S. is likely to be one of the biggest losers from this assassination, pointing to the fact that Russia and Turkey are, quote, getting exactly what they need from each other in Syria. Do you agree with that assessment, Talha Koze, that in point of fact, now what we are seeing, the closening of ties between Moscow and Ankara means that they're getting what they need from each other? What is it that they're getting that they need from each other in Syria?
I think it's a game-changer event. So my understanding of the assassination is that the main objective of this assassination is to obstruct Turkey's relations with Russia. So the rapprochement was going on, and it's really played an important role with the evacuation of the Aleppo. The second objective was to demonstrate that Turkey is, or show in some way that Turkey is secretly supporting some jihadist elements, which was done before with the National Intelligence Agency tracks before by the Fethullah elements. And also another important element of this attack is to demonstrate that Turkey is not a safe country. So I think the objectives of this attack has been recognized by both Putin and Erdogan, and they even declared their willingness to continue strengthening of the relations.
All right, so Talha Koze, when it comes to Syria, what is the deal between Turkey and Russia? What's the agreement they've reached? Because Russia supports Bashar al-Assad, Turkey is against him. What's their agreement?
I think the agreement is Turkey and Russia will be the guarantors in this political process, and Turkey will try to push the opposition in Syria to the political table and try to limit the potential of the more radical elements, and Russia will deal the same thing with the regime. So the agreement between Turkey and Russia will be consistent with the United Nations Security Council 2254 and all the other recognized agreements. So Turkey will try to keep the legitimate opposition in Syria on the table, try to let them be part of the political process, and Russia will be more likely to keep the regime in the table, and they will try to reach a political settlement. And this time the settlement will be, and Iran will be part of this negotiation process, and most likely in the coming weeks, Saudi Arabia may also be part of this. So I think this agreement is not an agreement on a particular issue or particular thing. It is more agreement to continue this political process together and be the guarantors of this process.
Faik Yagikzai, do you agree that this is an agreement to finally make some political headway when it comes to Syria, not, for instance, a carving up of territory?
It's about 5 years. Turkey followed a policy depending on supporting the Islamist groups, and especially the Muslim Brothers. And then, of course, there were a lot of other Islamic groups, Al-Nusra, the Daesh, and the others. And Turkey saw that this policy is not a policy that they can continue to follow. So that's why Turkey changed its policy recently, especially after the Davutoğlu's government. Erdogan decided to change this policy in Syria and come closer to the Russian policy, Iranian policy, because he saw that the Assad's regime is not going to collapse. And in order to prevent the Kurdish people to have a status in the future of Syria, he decided to have good relations with the Syrian regime, and he can do this not directly now because for 5 years he all tried to defeat the Assad's regime. So he is doing this now via Russia and Iran, and this agreement is to settle, of course, to reshape its policy only to prevent the Kurdish people in Syria to have a status in north of Syria.
But how is that going to work, knowing that Russia is closer to the YPG, to the Syrian Kurdish rebels, than it's sympathetic to them in any case? So how's that going to work? How is Turkey, what are they going to convince Vladimir Putin to distance themselves from the Syrian Kurds?
It's possible because now, everybody are dealing according to their own interests. So if Putin succeeds to distance Turkey from West and deal more with Turkey and bring Turkey closer to his own policies, and convince Turkey to accept Assad's regime, then it's possible that he can change his policy towards the Kurds as well.
Let me bring in Abdelbari Atwan on this. Do you agree with that?
I do agree, yes. I believe Erdogan realized if he wants to keep the unity of Turkey, if he actually wants to improve the economy, which is suffering a lot because of this instability caused by these terrorist attacks inside Turkey. So he realized that if he wants to save himself, to save his country, he has to change his policies. He has to go to Russia. And I believe in Syria, now he is adopting the vision of Vladimir Putin. And he is coming to the Iranian Russian-Syrian camp.
Can he convince Putin to distance himself from the Syrian Kurds, for instance?
I believe they will reach some sort of a middle ground, both of them, and they will freeze the situation of the Kurds in particular. We have to know that, or we know that, the American and Russian are supporting the Kurds. So maybe Erdogan realized that if he wants actually, and he trusted the Russian more than he does trust the American, he believed that maybe the Russian have the upper hands when it comes to the Kurdish problem. They are the neighbor, and the Russian used to deal with the PKK, the Kurdistan Revolutionary Party. So I think definitely there is some deal has been struck between Russia and Turkey vis-a-vis the Kurds. But I believe it is a turning point. Now, the Kurds are a threat to the Syrian, to the Iranian, and to the Turks. So maybe these three countries decided to get together and fight the Kurdish ambition to establish independent states, which actually will curve most of the north of Syria, the north of Iraq, and also eastern of Turkey, and Iran, and north of Iran also.
There's another player in all this, which we haven't mentioned up to now. It's called ISIS. As the evacuation of Aleppo draws to a close, Turkey getting stuck in the fight against Islamic State militants in Al-Bab, where 16 soldiers were killed, dozens injured, as the militants used suicide bombers. We've had word in the last 24 hours that Turkish airstrikes have killed civilians, possibly as many as 47, according to militants on the ground. Recep Tayyip Erdogan reacting to the killing of those 16 soldiers.
Al-Bab is now under total control of the Free Syrian Army and our troops. Of course, The Islamic State group is fighting for dear life and trying all means possible to hold on to Al-Bab. They are carrying out suicide bombings and all kinds of attacks with handmade explosives. Unfortunately, our soldiers have been martyred in these final stages.
Jasper Mortimer, we've been saying the last couple of years that many of the players in the Syrian conflict, for them, fighting ISIS was the second priority, that they had other enemies they wanted to fight first. Is that going to change now for Turkey?
Well, I think in its heart, the object of Turkey's intervention in Syria, which began in August, was to curb the Kurds. It wanted to confine them, stop them linking the two cantons that they hold in northern Syria, one in the northwest, the other in the center and northeast. And it's interesting that the understanding reached among the Turkish, Russian, and Iranian ambassadors in Moscow this week said that their joint priority was to fight the Islamic State group, not the Kurds. The second point there is that this understanding made no mention at all of the departure of President Bashar Assad from the pinnacle of government in Syria. That, too, is a big come down for Turkey. I think there's no question that although Turkey is going to gloss over this, the trilateral understanding in Moscow did not go Turkey's way, and certainly the Turkish policeman's killing of the Russian ambassador played a role in that. The Turkish liberal columnist Semih Ediz has said so, as you were suggesting in your questions in the first part of the show, that Turkey's position on Syria, Turkey's position vis-a-vis Russia, has certainly been undermined.
But when it comes, Jasper, to the issue of fighting ISIS, facts on the ground with this brutal battle in Al-Bab, does that make Turkey really focus much more on fighting Islamic State militants?
Well, President Erdogan has been saying for weeks now that Turkish forces are going to take Al-Bab. And bearing in mind that Al-Bab is just a small town, if not a village, it's very surprising that they haven't done so already. One of the factors in that, I think, was that the Russian Air Force controls the skies. The one concession that Turkey might have won out of Moscow this week was that the Russians will allow the Turks to take Al-Bab. But it's not going as well as the Turks would have wanted. That shows Turkey is not prepared to commit more forces. Surely the Turkish armed forces are much stronger than IS in the little town of Al-Bab. Today one had the Turkish Prime Minister coming out and saying that the battle for Al-Bab was an existential struggle for Turkey. Well, I can tell you, for the man and woman in the Turkish street, it is not. And the Turkish government knows very well that it's got to watch out how many casualties Turkish forces incur in Syria, because the man and woman in the Turkish street do not want Turkish soldiers being killed in that war. They want the Turkish army to get out of the Syrian swamp.
Talha Koze, just how much of a stomach do Turks have for fighting ISIS in Syria?
Unity against Turkey's war against this terrorist organization. So the main objective of the Euphrates Shield operation is to clear Turkey's borders from all terrorist elements, including ISIS and PYD, YPG elements that attacked Turkey. So all the bombs, some of the bombs are coming from Syria, from the YPG, PYD controlled area. So this is also a threat to Turkey, and there is increasing support for Turkey's struggle against terrorism.
Even as the casualty toll mounts.
Yes, I mean, even the casualties, because if Turkey does not make this struggle, over the Syria, it's coming into Turkey anyway. So trying to deal with this threat over the Syria is I think, more useful option for Turkey. So people see this. I mean, people see the threat coming from Syria, from either ISIS or PKK, and there is really important support for this. And all these attacks are also increasing the unity among the people. So there's an increasing consensus over this fight. Of course, the casualties are high because Turkey is clearly trying to keep the civilian casualties low in Al-Bab. Otherwise, the aerial bombardment will settle the issue. But Turkey is trying to keep relations with the people along the Al-Bab and in the Syria, having a better relations. So in that sense, having this kind of city war is a new experience for Turkey, and Turkey is trying to keep the civilian casualties. That's why
trying to keep the civilian casualties low, but having mitigated success if the reports prove true. Let me bring in Abdel Bari Atwan. If the reports prove true that 47 civilians were killed in airstrikes.
Francçois, if you look at the Arab media and some of the social media, there is a huge criticism of Turkey and Erdogan because of this death of civilian in Al-Bab, and this is a shifting of the media and a shifting of actually the position of many Arabs vis-a-vis Turkey. The other point is, Turkey used to fight the war in Syria by proxy, never been involved directly. But when it comes to Al-Bab, they are there, and this irritates the Syrian government. And despite Assad problems, he sent his warplane to bomb some Turkish position in Al-Bab itself, and 3 Kurdish Kurdish soldiers were killed. So I believe if that the toll increased among the Turkish forces in Al-Bab and other parts of Syria, I think this will be actually devastating to the Turkish policy in that part of the world. So I believe the Syrian government wouldn't let Erdogan to advance, and they said this is actually a clear violation of the Syrian sovereignty.
So we'd have a three-way fight between ISIS, the Syrians, and the Turks, the Syrians who most often have given ISIS a wide berth up to now.
The problem is, Turkey or the Turkish army in Al-Bab is fighting ISIS, they are fighting the Kurds, and they are fighting the Syrian army. So can they afford that? And in such very, very complicated situation. And as you mentioned, the Russian wouldn't allow actually Turkey to control Al-Bab because it will have a very, very bad reaction to their allies in Syria and in Iran at the same time. So if Turkey would like to have a camp, to be in the camp of the Syrian, the Iranian, Russian, I think they have to revise their attacks when it comes to the Al-Bab.
All right, which brings us back to that meeting in Moscow that Jasper Mortimer was talking about. It was the day after the Russian ambassador's assassination, Tuesday. Turkey's foreign minister keeping his appointment with his Russian and Iranian counterparts. As we were mentioning, the topic was Syria, horse trading, over how to get each other's proxies. Abdel Bari Atwan was talking about proxies a moment ago, to back off in a conflict that's in its 6th year.
We believe that the ceasefire should not cover terrorist groups like al-Nusra and the Islamic State group. But there are other groups that are also connected with the Syrian regime, for example, Hezbollah, and it is important to stop supporting them. In this case, it will be possible to have a ceasefire, but we should not point only at one group or one side. All sides should cease fire.
Abdel Bari Atwan, just how far will Turkey get with that demand when they're speaking with their Iranian counterparts, telling them, look, you guys, get Hezbollah out of Syria?
I don't think they will succeed. I believe, that the Turkish government threw the towel and they submitted completely or surrendered completely to the Russian and the Iranian point of view. Erdogan is going to the Iranian and going to the Russian. So I believe in this case he cannot actually dictate his terms on them. Hezbollah is there. The Iranian, expert or military expert are there. So Turkish Syrian army is there. So I believe he's saying this maybe for actually, for popular consumption, for domestic consumption. But he knows that Hezbollah is integral part of the war against so-called the terrorist organization in the Syrian territories.
Faik Yagizai, let me ask you, because we've had no traction with those U.S.-Russia talks, those Geneva conferences sponsored by the UN. Last week, we got word that the Russians were trying to set up this initiative with Turkey to try to make some headway without the United States, without the United Nations. They even named a venue, Astana, the capital of Kazakhstan. How far is that going to get?
Everybody knows and agrees that it was the Kurdish people who stopped the ISIS, who could defeat the ISIS, and who are really creating a more stable region and more democratic region in Syrian, in a part of Syria. But even though the Kurdish movements were not invited to the Geneva conferences, and it was because of the pressure coming from Turkey. We know this very well. But Turkey sees that now they cannot stop the United Nations to invite the Kurdish movements to this conference, and that's why they are trying to change the concept of this political talks about the future of the.
Well, they're not the only ones. The Russians are doing it as well. So how far are those talks going to get? The ones that don't involve the U.S. or the United Nations?
But you can talk everywhere and you can invite somebody. But if you don't invite those who are really involved and who are on the ground, then it's impossible to find a solution. So it's useless to do some conferences or some meetings and not invite those who are involved on the ground. So it will not have any results, even if they have some meetings in different parts of the world.
Talha Koze, you agree?
No, first of all, YPG does not represent the Kurds. YPG is an extremist terrorist organization targeting Turkey and also threatening the other moderate Kurds. So I think the Kurds' presence in the peace talks is important, but I don't think YPG is the representative of the Kurds. So in other case, if the YPG is also involved, we should also invite ISIS, we should also invite al-Nusra. So I think all the extremist elements, terrorist elements should be kept out of this negotiation process.
So you're putting the YPG on the same plane as ISIS?
Yes.
All right, but in the past, there's been negotiations between the Turkish government and the PKK. Right now, they're at war, but we all know at some point or another they're going to sit down at the table and talk.
I mean, if they change their policies, I mean, they have been attacking Turkey, they have been preparing the bombs and attacking over Turkey, and also threatening the other moderate Kurds, and they are violating human rights of the Arabs that are living in the Tel Aviv and some other regions, and there are some human rights reports about this. So definitely it's an extremist organization.
All right, two quick questions for you, Abdelbariat. One, this talk about talks taking place other than outside the UN, is this all because right now we're in this funny phase between U.S. presidents, right? The new president doesn't get inaugurated till late January, and that once we have a President Trump, then it'll be clear where the actual mediation happens?
Francçois, there is a vacuum now. American administration is completely out of the picture. John Kerry, who was behind the Vienna or Geneva formula for peace talks on Syria, he is leaving his post very soon, and we don't know when the new foreign minister of the United States will start his business. So to fill this vacuum, I believe that the Iranian, the Russian, the Turks, they are sitting together and trying to formulate a new formula to reach some sort of understanding among themselves first, and then between the Syrian government and the so-called moderate factions. This is what's happening. I believe the Russians are trying to start their own peace process, their own actually formula to impose or to reach a ceasefire, and then a national unity government, which some opposition members will be part of this government.
Jasper Mortimer, very briefly, because we're almost out of time. What's the view on Russia from ordinary Turks?
I don't think Turks have a great prejudice against Russia. Many Turks study the Russian language at universities here. Many Turks are extremely embarrassed by the policeman's killing of the Russian ambassador. Turks were dismayed by that. And I heard a man shouting on the scene of the incident on Monday night that America and Britain were to blame for it. The very next morning, a Turk opened fire with a pump-action shotgun at the American embassy, which is 100 meters from the building where the Russian ambassador was shot. I think Turks have goodwill towards Russians, particularly the 5 million Russian tourists that come to Turkey in a good year. They bring a lot of money.
So they want things to obviously improve on that score. I want to thank you, Jasper Mortimer. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I want to thank Talha Koze, Faik Yagigzeh, Abdelbari Atwan. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.